Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Vampires. One of my subscribers, a man by the name of Lorenzo, got in touch with me via MatthewDawkins.com to confirm that he had picked up a traditional print copy of The World Below. Thank you very much, Lorenzo. Very much appreciated. And off the back of that, as well as giving a lot of praise to The World Below, requested a video, as is his right, as is your right. If you have recently backed Monster Kingdoms for a deluxe version, or if you have picked up The World Below in traditional printed version, you can request a video of your choosing. From me, I will create it and put it on this channel. And Lorenzo wanted a video on the subject of the Endless Night. You see, Lorenzo has some, we'll call them preferences, some, I'm going to say an unhealthy enjoyment of Clan Giovanni, the Hecata, the Necromancers, the Venetians. You see, these regional-based clans. It's very difficult for me to not break... I try to do these videos out of character, but as soon as I start talking about clans, I start... these incestuous, soul-sucking fucks. The Giovanni. Lorenzo wanted to know about the Endless Night and what it was seeking to accomplish, whether it was just a mad scheme of Augustus Giovanni and the upper echelons, the Anciani and others in the clan. Was there at all the possibility of a positive outcome? Because on the face of it, the Endless Night's agenda, which Augustus has put in place, whether through the manipulation of Cappadocius and Japheth or of his own volition, I would suggest the Endless Night is Augustus's plan. He isn't a puppet, in that regard anyway. He ostensibly wants to collect enough souls to charge what is essentially a necromantic weapon. We're talking millions of souls here. I think it's about 100 million or something like that. 100 million souls that have been scooped up from things like nuclear events, global wars, and these have been collected over the centuries, and they're all being stored in the mausoleum underneath Venice in the water, to ultimately cause a rupture in the shroud, the gauntlet, the film between the world of the living and undead and the dead. So once the shroud comes down, all of the wraiths will be free, and the only clan that will be able to come out on top of all of this mayhem will be the Necromancers, the Giovanni. Lorenzo has pointed out quite accurately that this is something of a self-destructive plan. It is an end-of-the-world plan. It is apocalyptic. It would utterly ruin the world, destroying everything that is good and fit and vital, because not only that, it would also greatly weaken the Giovanni, Lorenzo believes, because their control over wraiths is not absolute, and if every single wraith, every single spectre, every single entity from the underworld was suddenly free to enter the world of the living, the Giovanni would swiftly find themselves overwhelmed. So Lorenzo wants to know, is there any kind of strategy here? Is there any nuance to this plan that would actually allow the Giovanni to come out on top? And the simple answer is no. It is an insane plan. It is an apocalypse event. This is not an event where, if it were to occur in your chronicle, the world would easily recover. That's not to say, and this is where I get on to how to actually incorporate the Endless Night into your games, that you can't do it. You see, if the Endless Night goes off exactly as Augustus Giovanni wants, which requires considerably more bloodshed and world wars, although, you know, we're getting there in the real world now, aren't we? You would have to localize it. As a storyteller, you'd need to localize it. You'd need a necromancer with sufficient power to center a mini Endless Night. We'll call it if not endless, a lengthy night. We'll start with a rural location, a place off the beaten track. Let's see what it's like when the shroud comes down. whether we can basically corral and control the wraiths that pour through the hole before it seals back up again, what effect it has on the humans there, what effect it has on the vampires there, whether we are able to still pull the strings while it's going on. Can we contain something on a local level in a place where not many people are going to hear of it? So it's highly likely that Giovanni would conduct this experiment, probably not in a place of mass communication. They're going to pick on a village, or at best town, well, at worst I should say, a town, probably somewhere in Central Asia or Central Africa. Maybe, no, South America is too connected. Central Asia or Central Africa probably seems the best possible location. Pay off some corrupt officials, and not saying we want these people to perform necromancy on. We're basically going to take care of this village. We're going to finance their recovery, that kind of thing. Cut them off, petri dish them, and see what happens. So you could basically have an endless night test run. And the reason this can play into a chronicle is because you can have your vampires, either they are the Giovanni or Hecata, who are trying to manage this project as it all goes wrong, because it has to go wrong. If it all goes right, it isn't a terribly interesting plot. Or you are other Cainites or kindred who somehow get dragged into this, who are passing through the area and get caught in the middle of this under the dome like debacle. Debacle is a minor way, rather reduced way of referring to this absolute hell that would be unleashed. Now, let's say that the Giovanni are successful, that not only can they release wraiths from the underworld, but they are able to exert even more control over them without having to pull them through the Shadowlands. That because not only do they have a ready access to blood, they also can pull on the wraith's corpus, and they can basically empower themselves and their necromancy. And the wraiths, for some reason, do not bite the hand that feeds in this case. So the wraiths basically derive passions and energy from the living, and the vampires are draining the blood from the husks. And they make a sort of simpatico relationship. And so the Giovanni say, okay, test subject 1 completed. Let's move on to a slightly larger one. We need to manufacture a crisis in a city, something that's going to cut it off, and we're going to do the exact same thing there. Let's see if we can do this with a lot of our clan mates in place to manufacture an endless night at a slightly larger scale. Now, maybe your vampires in this story are the only people aware of this, and you're trying to notify the prince, you're trying to notify the Justicars, you're trying to say, this is what the Clan of Death are up to. You need to deal with these people. It's a little like, at this point, it becomes something of an apocalypse movie, an Independence Day, an Ice Age kind of thing, where your vampires are the only ones who know the truth, and the people in charge are too bureaucratic or too corrupt to actually do anything to stop it. And then it happens. At this point, you've got a Bane in Dark Knight Rises situation where all the bridges are cut off into Gotham City, and the Giovanni basically open the shroud, tear it open, and the city becomes subject, Ghostbusters style, to an endless night event. Larger than the lengthy night, now it is the turgid night, and I think turgid is the wrong word, but we'll go for it. I write for a living, I should know. At which point you have a holocaust of urban proportions, or urban holocaust, I should say, because these wraiths are going to quickly fall out of control. This is where you would actually have a city worth of vampires trying to probably defeat the Giovanni, but the Giovanni aren't going to be stupid. They're not going to do this in a vacuum, and they're probably going to do it in a place where they already have significant power. Probably not Venice. Venice is too valuable to them, but Boston is being groomed for this kind of thing with the Malinas. And I could very well see the Malinas at the last moment saying, you know what, we don't actually want to drop the bomb on our city. We've got a lot that's invested here. And the Giovanni masters say, why do you think we've kept you around for close to 100 years? It's not because we like your hats. It's not because we like your impersonation of John F. Kennedy. It's because you have been grooming this city. to be a mini version, a test version of Venice. So stand aside or help, but if you're going to obstruct us, you will be joining the Legion of Wraiths. So again, when we're talking Endless Night, we're not looking at a street-level, intimate horror game. We're looking at something more along the lines of Transylvania Chronicles 4 or Giovanni Chronicles 3 or 4. We're talking about something where the conspiracy level of the game gets so high that you're very unlikely to be worried about your mortal sister or paying your landlord the rent or how you're going to convince your boss that you don't need to turn up for work today because you need to pursue some kind of vampiric agenda. This is high tier stakes in a game of Vampire the Masquerade, where you're dealing with power players and basically being involved in big set pieces. Now, your characters can, of course, still be involved in intimate things like saving people or indeed preying on people. You still need blood, after all, but you are trapped just as much as everybody else. Therefore, you may have to make common cause with the Anarchs. Hell, you may need to make common cause with the Sabbat to get through this, because this is not the apocalyptic event they were pursuing. And then, of course, you've got the Endless Night at a global scale. Whether this goes right or wrong, maybe Augustus has been observing all of this, and Adolf Hitler style, he basically says, well, look, if we don't deserve... If we can't win this, then we don't deserve to exist, and neither does the rest of the world. And so he decides, with his most fanatical loyalists, to tear down the shroud in total. It's gone. Starting in Venice, explosion of the underworld. This is where characters are probably going to have to seek out necromancers from other clans. There's not going to be enough of them. This is where they're going to have to hothouse themselves, study up in the black arts themselves to do what they can. But your Vampire the Masquerade game at that point is irrevocably changed if you get to that stage. You're not going to get back to the low-key Chronicles that you've been playing previously. This is a very different kind of vampire game. So you can use the Endless Night as Augustus Giovanni foresees it. But just be aware that if you go up to that level, it's very difficult to put the lid back on the box unless you set the game several years later, playing new characters, and can talk about it in the rear view. Now, none of this answers the question Lorenzo asked of basically, is there any logic? Is there any nuance to this? What is Augustus thinking? How is he going to control it? I think you can't control it at a global scale. And it's Augustus Giovanni's arrogance, his hubris, that makes him think that he can. Is he mad? I guess by a mortal rationale he is. He believes that he has absolute control over life and death. After all, he diablerized, in his view, the master of death, the god of death who made him his son, Cappadocius. So he believes he is as close to God or Hades as he possibly can be. So Augustus Giovanni doesn't doubt that he has the capacity, and through his descendants, because he believes his clan are fundamentally loyal to him, that they will be able to exert all of this control over the wraiths. And in doing so, they will be able to puppet the world to their whim. What's the agenda from there? Is it just to tear the shroud down and control wraiths and living at the same time? Well, this is I mentioned Hitler. And I think actually it's a fair comparison in a way, because Augustus Giovanni is one of the very few antediluvians who we know has an objective, is working towards it, and it is against basically every other vampire that doesn't wish to subjugate themselves to him. And I compare him to a mortal Hitler, because Hitler's agenda was not conquest, was not France is going to be a state under German control, or indeed the same for Britain or Scandinavia or indeed anywhere else. His agenda was the destruction of the Jewish people, the destruction of Bolshevism, any Soviets, and the radical reduction in Slavic people. And when he saw that he could not achieve this. When the war was coming to a close and he was aware that he was losing, he didn't suddenly say, well, I lost, fair enough, hands up. He decided to speed things up. He wanted to kill as many as he could, including himself, because if we can't do it, if we can't succeed, we don't deserve to exist. And I see Augustus Giovanni in that kind of mold. His ends are not rational. Does that make him insane, or does it just make him solipsistic? He isn't seeing this through the lens of mortal eyes. He believes that it will genuinely be a better world if the Shroud doesn't exist, if all of the dark arts he wants access to are floating around in the ether, if mortals are in a permanent state of terror, and maybe they will come to him as a god for protection, tying back into that whole mafia thing. It's the ultimate extortion. No one can protect you against the undead and the dead except the Giovanni. So you come to us, you give us absolutely everything we could want of you, which means our mortal descendants get to use you as they will. Our vampiric descendants get to drink from you, control you, puppet you as they will. You worship me, and I will protect you. Don't, and I will push you out the door and leave you to the swarms of thousands, hundreds of thousands of wraiths out there that will drain the life clean from you. Augustus Giovanni is not a nice man. He is not a rational man. He is, I guess by any measure, psychotic. But he does have an agenda. It's just not terribly sympathetic if you are a mortal or a vampire with any humanity whatsoever. Why would you support this? And in fact, why would the vast majority of Giovanni support this? They don't. One of the mistakes a lot of players of Giovanni make, if I can gatekeep for a moment, and Hecata too, is the idea that everyone knows the plot of the clan or the family. And they don't. When you're first embraced into the clan, you may have some ideas that your family goes back several generations, several centuries, that you came about after replacing the old crusty lot, and so on and so forth, but you don't know what the Endless Night entails. That requires a level of trust to be looped into the conspiracy, to be brought into this worldwide genocide. That is something at a high level. And to keep making that comparison, I can very well imagine Augustus Giovanni doesn't trust his fanatical followers. He pits them against each other like Himmler versus Goering and Bormann versus Goebbels and so on, because he wants all of them competing for his affection, for his trust, for his respect, because if they're fighting each other, they are not opposing him. So in that respect, it isn't too difficult to imagine why the clan ultimately revolted against Augustus Giovanni. It was several hundred years in the making. He lasted a lot longer than he had any right to, but he had that power for quite some time. And then, with the beckoning and so forth, maybe he was weakened sufficiently. Well, he wasn't beckoned because of the whole, it didn't affect the Hecata thing, so scratch that. I need to remember the parts of the plot that I wrote, don't I? But yeah, maybe he took his eye off the ball just for long enough for Ambrogino and Japheth and others to launch a coup and set the clan in a different direction. So, in answer to your question, Lorenzo, does the Endless Night have any, I guess, nuance to it beyond the mad scheme of a vampire who would be God? Yes, if you run it to have one. But The Endless Night was never written as a story hook that was ever going to see fulfillment in a sourcebook of Vampire the Masquerade. The Endless Night could not succeed in published Vampire without completely changing Vampire. The Giovanni were never going to be the winners in Vampire the Masquerade. They are a fringe clan with a bizarre philosophy, with an insane plan, and they are built primarily as antagonists. The Endless Night is a plan to be stopped. So, you can, of course, play as Giovanni and Hecata who are pursuing it, but it's far better to play those Giovanni and Hecata who see it come to pass and realise, whoa, okay, our boss has got his finger on the big red button, and it's going to spell doom for us as well as the rest of the world. We need to cut his finger off and maybe his head. That makes for an interesting political family story and leads pretty much directly into the whole family reunion of V5. The fact that the rest of the clan realised, we're being abused, we're being tortured, we're being pitted against each other. For what? For this person? For Augustus Giovanni, Uncle Augie, with his dreams of ending the world? Let's rethink this plan. Let's work towards unification and exerting ourselves on the world in a way that isn't just going to end up in our destruction. I like the idea that some of the real fringe fanatical Giovanni are still out there, that they are still pursuing their doom agenda. I think that's a lot of fun. And again, God, I keep bringing comparisons back to Nazis, but I think it is a fair comparison, because just as the Second World War ends, demonstrably fascism fails. There is not a country yet that has succeeded on the back of fascism, and in the Second World War they are well and truly crushed. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't still some hardcore believers out there who flee to Argentina or hide in plain sight, who still pursue their loathsome, racist, anti-Semitic, bigoted agendas, genocidal agendas. I love the idea that even though Augustus is destroyed and gone, I love the idea that his most faithful lieutenants are likewise diablerized. Goodbye, Diego. There are some out there who still believe and want to fulfill Augustus's last dream. That is a terrifying thought, but a lot of fun for a Vampire the Masquerade chronicle. So, consider it. Think about it. Maybe use it in your own games. Now, with all of that said, I want to say thank you very much, but I'm not done. I'm not done. So thank you very much, Lorenzo. We have about 1 day left. 1 day left for Monster Kingdoms. Monster Kingdoms is on back-a-kit right now. Speaking of ending the world, all of the Earthbane cycle games, The World Below, At the Gates, Monster Kingdoms, all have an end of the world, an apocalyptic theme to them. And Monster Kingdoms is no exception. If you want to play an Endless Night game in Monster Kingdoms, congratulations, there is a kingdom where it has occurred. The kingdom of Dis has been overrun by wraiths due to a wasting necromantic disease that killed the entire living population and forced all of them to come back as vengeful spirits. You can play those wraiths, or you can play people trying to exist in this rather desolate wasteland that is pinned between the Nythera Empire, the Orcish kingdom of Kursh, and the vampiric kingdom of Krior. You can play orcs, you can play wraiths, you can play vampires. All of these are available as playable in Monster Kingdoms. You've got 1 day left to back this game. Please do consider doing so. The link to do so is in the video description below, and I would love it if you check it out. We will need more support. I would need more support on this game. How I make a living is by selling these games, working on them, and so I need games like Monster Kingdoms to do well, because these aren't under license. This is Onyx Path, pure Onyx Path. Therefore, any support you give us is greatly appreciated and goes to pay for me to stay creative. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much, Lorenzo, for the video request. Very much appreciated, and I will see you next time.